We're here to talk about representation on Broadway, and the two of you know so much about this. Krystal, you're Eliza in Hamilton right now, which is such a hallmark show for representation. You were also in Hamilton, and you were in Thoughts of a Colored Man this fall, which was one of a whole slate of Black-led productions to come when Broadway came back. So I just wanted to start with a check-in. How do you guys think we're doing with representation?
Well, I definitely have seen a difference. My Broadway debut was in 2009, and I was in Hair. And as we've come back, over the period of the 18 months where we were shut down, we really started to focus on mental health, how we're talking about race, how we're talking about diversity and inclusion. And also in the Broadway world, we have never had an HR department. We've never had, there's no one to go to. You just kind of deal with it and move forward. And we didn't ever, especially as a person of color, you didn't really feel as though there was the ability to say anything. And during that 18 months, our company in particular really focused on how do we open up the dialogue, how do we talk about people's concerns when it comes to wigs, or how we even just every little like minutia of being a person of color in the theater, and really laid it out there and really talked about it, so that when we came back, we did more of a holistic approach. We had a healer who would come in the first hour and a half of rehearsal every single day. We did yoga and meditation, and we had a pallet on the floor, you know, in the side, where people could come and cry because we hadn't been together. We had been isolated, and we have to put ourselves out there in such a vulnerable way that it's terrifying. And so it was really a big concern to Hamilton and for me to come back into the space where we were really being honest with where we were and where we wanted to go, especially when we had made all of these kind of promises and decisions during the break, during that 18 months of being like, okay, we're gonna come back and we're gonna be social justice warriors, and we're gonna lead Broadway in how we talk about diversity and inclusion. We're gonna get an HR person, we're gonna get a social media manager. Like, yes, but we also have to start like from day one, rehearsal 1, 2. And so that was like the biggest change, is just seeing the humanity coming into Broadway and talking and being able to say these things, which a lot of times we don't have the power to say. So the fact that we can even say anything has been one of the biggest changes for me.
Yeah, it's huge. You know, we all know that there's a big difference between representation and inclusion.
Yes.
And so what I can say is that I think that as an industry, both on Broadway and the Hollywood space, we've done a pretty good job. It's a marathon, we still got work to do, but we've done a good job at representation. Representation is about the numbers, it's about the data, it's about race, it's about gender, and now sexual orientation, right? So with the success like our show, Hamilton, you can see the representation. Inclusion is a different thing.
Yeah.
Inclusion is about, once you have those numbers and once you have those people, are they valued? Are they respected? And I do believe that as an industry, we're starting to lead the charge in that direction. You know, speaking to so many of the things that Krystal said, being in Thoughts of a Colored Man, where it was the first play on Broadway to be produced, designed, directors, and the actors, all people of color. The majority people of color. First time ever.
2021.
2021, right? And it was kind of great. There was a bit of a Forbes leak in February that that released some data that we were actually, of the 5 shows that were all written by people of color that premiered this season, we were leading the charge financially every week by a very large margin. Here's the thing, though. It's still an experiment. So George Floyd dies, and now as an industry, we want to do all these black shows. I think it's wonderful, right? However, we're doing these shows in an environment that's a test.
Yep.
We don't know how audiences are going to come back to Broadway, and many of those shows, if not most of those shows, closed because of COVID. And so we've still got some work to do. I think it's a beautiful thing to have representation. I think Broadway has done a great job of that. We are working and climbing and running in the marathon of inclusion. And the work has begun, but we got a lot of work to do.
Right. Like, to piggyback off of what you're saying, is that all of these shows that were released in September, October, November of last year were under, once again, the harshest circumstances that we've ever faced in the Broadway community. And it was the experiment of, you know, our audience is going to come back. So once again, as Black people, brown people, given the hardest circumstances to thrive. And that's, again, like, how come we always have to have the hardest circumstances in order to prove ourselves? Or, okay, well, great, you guys did great in these really terrible circumstances. Or, well, it didn't do well enough to survive COVID, so we're shutting you down. And so it's those little things where you're like, was that truly changing the face of Broadway, changing the great white way? Or was it a Band-Aid, here you go.
A ticking of the box.
Yeah, a ticking of the box. Yeah, a ticking of the box. But it is so imperative to have representation. And so it's just great to even have it. And we're like, yay, we got a foot in the door. But it's like, it's time really, truly to kick the door down and to be, and what ends up happening is that we really need ownership.
Yes.
You know, we have to be the owners, we have to be the creators, the producers, and we have to have more of a stake than just being a body that people can see and go, oh, great, but behind the door, every single other person who's making the real money is white. So that's important too, to note.
And both of you are working on that. Both of you are reaching into the roots of where theater work begins and trying to bring in younger people. You're trying to educate people. Bryan, can you talk about some of the work you've been doing in colleges and towns?
Absolutely, yeah. I've been doing a lot of work, y'all. Those of you who, you know, we're talking to the leaders in D&I, right? So it's a little bit preaching to the choir. So you all know that, like, you know, this work requires a lot of self-care. And once I stepped out of the self-care that I needed to dig into in COVID, I put my hands to work again. I'm working with some powerful leaders in theater to create a nonprofit called Theater Equitable Marketplace. Theater Equitable Employment Marketplace. It goes by TEAM. And we have partnered with the Miranda Foundation along with my sister Ava DuVernay over at Array Crew. And we are fighting to get representation behind the scenes. I think, like I said, we've done a pretty good job of showing you that, you know, these brown faces sell on Broadway. However, behind the scenes, the spotlight operators, the electricians, props, costumes, we don't have enough diversity back there. And it really is an uphill battle because the unions are strong and a lot of that is family,
yeah.
You know.
Grandfathered in and all of that.
Grandfathered in, all of that. And so, Ava DuVernay has led the charge in Hollywood. I've worked on 3 of her projects, and it is the most diverse crew I have ever seen in existence. And now we're trying to bring that to Broadway. And so we're creating fellowships that start at the high school level so that we can go to these arts programs nationally and we can say, hey, you are super talented, but we know that you can't afford to come to New York City on a free internship. And learn the craft, right? I had a friend in college who was one of the most amazing directors I've ever seen. And we had another friend, one was of color, one was not, who was an okay director. The director that's directing on Broadway right now is the one who could afford to come and shadow and take these internships for free. So we're trying to create a real pipeline here so that young people, and we're not even being ageist, it doesn't even matter how old you are, people who have the talent but have not been given the opportunity because they can't afford it, we're creating those fellowships and trying to knock the door down, as you said, backstage.
Yeah. And something that over the pandemic that we started at Hamilton is called Ham for Progress. Originally, we called it the Hamilton Racial Justice Task Force, and that was created in August of 2020, July, August of 2020. So we really focused on voting, and we partnered with Until Freedom, and we partnered with Ava DuVernay, and of course, like Luis Miranda is a part of our little coalition, to really make sure that everyone has the accessibility to voting. That was our number one, because that was like our most present issue. And even right now, as we move forward, a year later, we've done so much. We've worked with so many organizations that are incredible for a plethora of things. But even right now, we're figuring out ways how to get materials to the LGBTQIA+ community that's of color in Ukraine. We're figuring out ways to get fellowships in our theater, and we have 5 touring companies. We have so many outlets to bring kids in. And we also do something called Edugeham, which is once a month. They're the best shows ever.
It's my favorite show.
Yeah, it's typically kids who would not be able to afford to come to see the show can come for $10, and they see the show with their high schools, and they rent the whole theater for that Wednesday matinee, and it is so incredible. So we're trying to figure out ways constantly to make sure that, especially Broadway, which can be very elitist in a lot of ways. The ticket is expensive. It's not easy to get here. To make sure that there's accessibility, and also to make sure that the organization that we've created, Ham for Progress, has actionable items that people can do to stay engaged and figure out ways that they can actually, take the change that we talk about and actually make it into something. We also did, for our first time ever, we did 10 scholarships to incredible students, all types, not necessarily kids that are in the arts at all, kids that are gonna figure out how to save the planet, quite literally. So it was exciting to look at their essays and their creativity, and they just really inspired us, and we hope to continue to be able to give in that way moving forward.
It's amazing, you guys. Bryan, you said something, you say brown faces sell, and it's something that we've talked about, which is that D&I is also a business opportunity. And I want you to explain that.
It is, and I don't know why people don't see it. It's interesting to me. It is, because as we've spoken about earlier, what we're seeing in the D&I world, all of you are seeing, is that people are getting tired in the marathon, right? I speak often with corporations and with colleges. I work with Kepler speakers, and I had a conversation the other day that a lot of D&I speakers at the top of the George Floyd thing, hired. Everybody wanted to hear the story, right? And get the information and get the data. And now people are getting exhausted. And what's interesting is, I don't think that people really understand that a D&I strategy is not just a moral thing for you to do. It's a growth strategy. It's a growth strategy. And I think when it comes to business, it's important to understand that. For example, we did Thoughts of a Color Man, the experiment. What we found is that we were grossing higher than any play at the time. Not only that, this is why it's important. Not only that, but over 50% of every audience were African American and people of color. Not only that, but about 61% had never been to a Schubert theater. So essentially, we expanded the audience base. I remember in 2016, I was the first African-American male to be the lead in a Humera commercial. But it's crazy because it scored the highest and became the gold standard for years. So the data is showing that when you actually do open the door when it comes to representation, you expand your base. So I'm a little confused. I think that we're often used to sell the thing, but now you have to ask us how we feel about it. and I also think that it's the wisest thing to do, and a lot of you have seen this. I think there's been a lot of embarrassing moments, particularly with a lot of brands and a lot of fashion spaces in the last 10 years. And not to quote Hamilton, but you just need the right people in the room where it happens.
Right.
We're actors, but we're also, I'm a content creator, I'm a speaker, and what ends up happening is they don't pull people in the room who are community verified.
I like that, community verified.
Have people in the room with you that are community verified. And the reason why that's important is because sometimes you don't want to hear this kind of sterile view of D&I work, right? But I'll come and rap some Hamilton to you, and then we can get into the conversation, right? So I think that it's important to even diversify the conversation around diversity and inclusion, and so that we can last the marathon, because it is going to be a marathon, and that's okay. We just need to learn how to take some water and take some breaths and make the journey a little easier, and that's where artists come in. Artists have always been a part, historically, of every major civil rights movement. And yet, we're always kind of consulted later. Bring us in the room. Bring us in the room.
The conversation is happening because, in large part, because artists are telling the stories that people hear and people digest, and that's something you guys have talked about, and I think it's so important to remember.
Yeah.
What are some of the changes you guys have seen behind the scenes in the past few years?
Oh man, I mean, honestly, definitely the elements of taking care of mental health. Like I said before, being able to speak about how we're feeling, having somewhere to go and not feel as though if you say something about what is going on with you that you will be considered a problem. As a Black woman, I always feel like I have to be perfect. I have to be, if I even look a certain way, then I could be construed as angry, or I could be difficult. That's, I mean, as a woman, period, you know, your voice goes a certain way, you're shrill, you know, just everything is always really, really looked at. And I do believe that people are hearing me and seeing me differently. But that's also because I'm also looking at myself differently. I'm not saying that I have to be in a box that the society created that I have to be. I can be more representative of myself and of my people, you know, so that I can create that pathway, because I think that we often have been told to be in this box, and you have to be the representative self, the representative Black, the representative version of yourself in order to be in these predominantly white spaces, because you don't want to scare them. You don't want to get anyone going like, oh, well, she's difficult, or she's gonna say something. I'm like, no, I love this. I love Broadway. I love Hamilton. I wanna make it better. Like, bring me on to make it better. I don't wanna tear it down. I wanna build it up. I believe in this thing. So the more that I've been able to really speak my truth, and the fact that I've been able to do that at Hamilton, and I hope to bring this on to every job that I have, and it has given me the strength. I've done a movie where I asked for a Black hair and makeup person, and like the first time I've ever asked for a Black hair and makeup person, or someone who specialized with Black hair and makeup.
Amen.
You know, and I was terrified, but I think that this, being in the Broadway community, being with my people who are willing to sit down and say, what is it, what's going on, has allowed me to show up differently. And that's been something that's been major. I just think the listening, and then the other major thing that happened to me during the pandemic is that these amazing group of women producers invited me into the room. They invited me, there's weekly Zooms, and we sit and we talk about what's happening in Broadway. Some of them are with the Broadway League. I would always give the actor's opinion because I was the only actor, but they're like, you're gonna be a producer. We know it, you're a producer any minute. And I'm like, the fact that this, you know, these women, predominantly white women, invited me in to learn and are inviting me in to potentially be on the ground floor of investing. That's a big change. That never happened to me before. So I'm always saying, invite us in. You know, it's not just gonna be us kicking the door down. These white spaces or these homogenized spaces of any sort have to be willing enough to let us in and invite us in.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Totally agree.
This is the part where we talk about what you in the room can do.
Yeah, because I think
you watching on Zoom.
Totally. I think that the thing that's consistent about every marketplace is that it's ever shifting and it's ever changing, right? And so I think that, to piggyback off of what you were saying, that resonated so deeply with me, is that the difference now is that you can't just kind of throw a Black face on a product that's not authentic, right? So for us, you know, we look at colorblind casting and things like that, and I think that there was a world and a time where we could do a Doll's House and just make it Black. Or we could do, you know, a Shakespeare piece and just kind of make it Black, and that was enough. But now I think in every marketplace, what's ringing true is authenticity. It has to be authentic. And so that's where we kind of come in. This is, you know, you were asking the questions, you know, how can we help? How can we push the movement forward? Authenticity. Right. Authenticity. Ask people into the room, listen to people who don't just have the data and the book smarts, but have lived experience. And that's what I mean by community verified. You want people in the room to help push and expand whatever you're doing in the marketplace that have an authentic voice. That's what's gonna make your space in the marketplace different. You know, I had a casting director when I first graduated who said, let's just say lemons are the thing that everybody wants today. So what happens is everybody tries to make themselves a lemon, not knowing that the only consistent thing about a marketplace is that it changes. So next week we want an apple, and you've been trying to be this lemon. So now you're this weird apple lemon thing. Crazy metaphor, but my point is this. My point is this.
I get it. I get it.
In the D&I space, bring your authenticity. Bring your authenticity when it comes to being hired to create content for brands, when it comes to being asked to speak often, as I am in brands. I used to think that I had to come in and be extremely scholarly, and people are tired of that. People want authenticity. Authenticity is what sells. Authenticity is what makes us as human beings respond. We don't buy based on the data. We buy based on how we feel. And I will connect to you and I'll feel the resonance of you if it's authentic. And that's where you can come in. Bring in authentic people.
I just want to add one tiny little thing, which is you keep saying the word expand, and it just makes me always think of the universe is constantly expanding, right? Like, and so is our world of the arts, of our world of concepts of gender, race, sexuality, all of that is all expanding, and there is more. And I think that a lot of times we think with a lack mentality, which makes us go, if this person gets something, I'm gonna lose something. And that's when people start having scapegoats, that's when people start having fear, and they forget that there is actually a really broad, wider scope that we're creating. There's more networks than ever, there's more theaters, there's more artistic spaces, and so we have to think more and not less. We have to think that we're working with, in coordination with the universe that is expanding, and we're just bringing this out. Because we were here, and now we're getting wider and wider, and I think that that's the beautiful thing about where we are at this point, which is what should propel us to continue to do this work, because there are changes. We're seeing it. We are it.
Yeah.
We've seen it in our careers, and we've seen it with where we're going, and so it's continue to expand as much as we possibly can, and remember, there is enough for us, all of us.
Because that lack mentality is based in fear.
Yeah.
Right? Let's just be honest. Everybody's afraid. Everybody's afraid to try something new. Everybody's afraid of change. But I think what we're learning is that if you lean into the change, you'll actually find exponential progress.
And growth.
And so, like I say, a D&I strategy is a growth strategy. And so we want to make sure that we're also leaning into that. It's not just a moral thing. It is a moral thing. But let the fear go and allow your business to expand, allow your work to expand, allow your consciousness to expand. And that's the kind of work we're doing.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. We are out of time.
Thank you,
Please
guys,
give a round of
for
applause
having us.
for Krystal and Bryan.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.